Welcome to the show designed to give you crypto confidence. Created by the marketing communications specialists at Blocksparks, we want to help you learn about cryptocurrency and blockchain in a safe and friendly place. Because we believe this stuff is far too exciting to leave it to the geeks. Come and join us to learn more. Hello, Crypto Confidence listeners. Today we have a bit of a special episode for you because we're bringing you something a little bit different. I've been working on a personal project which I hope will be of interest to you, but as I can't really interview myself about it, I'm joined for this recording by my colleague Diana. Welcome, Diana.
Hello, everyone.
Diana's our head of social media at Blocksparks, and Blocksparks is the company behind this podcast. And Diana last featured on our podcast way back in episode 4 last October when we talked about learning about cryptocurrency and blockchain. Interestingly, back about then in October, that was around the time that the subject of today's recording was starting to take shape in my mind, though I hadn't talked to anybody about it at that point. Anyway, I'll let Diana take over from here and ask me all about it, and hopefully all will be revealed.
Right, okay, well, the shoe is well and truly on the other foot today.
Oh,
I'm a little bit nervous about interviewing the interviewer, but there you go. We will get through it. So, I have some questions for you, Maya. Okay, what is Beyond the Chain and why did you write it?
Okay, well, Beyond the Chain is a novel. And I've never attempted to write fiction before. So you say that you're nervous, Diana. This is actually me being incredibly vulnerable, finally bringing this thing to publication and putting it out there. But I have always been a storyteller, I guess, even though very much in a non-fictional way. I like to find analogies and examples to bring alive the tech concepts that I write about for Blocksparks and for our clients. And I wanted to tell a story which would help introduce some key concepts in blockchain and crypto. I think stories are the way we learn, they're the way we communicate, the way we share. And I've learned a lot of things through story. In fact, a few years ago, I remember when I first started working for a client in Agile and Scrum, and a lot of those concepts were new to me then. And somebody recommended there were a couple of novels which helped really embed those concepts, and some of them in a slightly contrived way, but it was just really helpful for me because it was something I could follow. To sit and read a non-fiction book which delves into technical concepts, that's quite challenging. And we're lucky that there are lots of other ways to learn about things, of course, like podcasts and videos and so on, but I love reading, I love stories, and so I really wanted to write the equivalent for blockchain of things like Rolling Rocks Uphill was for Scrum or the Phoenix Project for DevOps. I wanted to find a way to teach some of the key concepts, to have a character who went on a journey of learning about this and met people who helped along the way to embed them. So yeah, that was the idea behind it, and I can only hope that I've managed to pull it off somehow.
That's brilliant, and that is absolutely what you're all about in every aspect of your work and your life, is educating people in a way that isn't patronising. It's a complicated subject, and you find ways of getting that story across.
I hope so.
You really have got, found a way of getting the story across and actually teaching people, as well as making it an interesting and a good read. And I think you're very brave putting yourself out there for potential criticism, but although hopefully there won't be any of that. None of that at all.
Well, I do need feedback, so bring it on.
Definitely, yeah. Okay, so without spoilers, what can you tell us about the story and what happens in it?
Okay, well, I definitely don't want to spoil the story. So what can I say about it? It is a story about a journey. It's the journey of a friendship between two characters, and it's the personal journey of one of the characters on her own journey to freedom and emancipation from various life circumstances. And she learns about cryptocurrency on the way as a metaphor for personal growth, but it also proves to be a practical solution for some of the things she has to overcome. And it hopefully reflects the path that she's on and the different people that come into her life that are able to help her at different times.
Lovely. That sounds very, very interesting indeed. Your lead character is female. Is this a book for women?
I hope not. That's not the intention. The genre is psychological thriller and tech thriller. and the issues and content are not specifically female oriented. Now, I really wanted to create a strong female lead character. I suppose it's the old adage of write what you know, but I really don't want the readership to be constrained by that. And I've tried all the time to consider the reader. Yes, the character is female. That reflects my lived experience. She's also British, which reflects my lived experience. But I don't think there's anything in the story that's particularly necessarily hung up on the experience of living in the UK, which I haven't done for a long time anyway. So I wanted to write it around her journey because she's constrained by lots of different disadvantages in her life, but she represents anybody who's got different pressures and different oppressions in their life. And she has access to the same information, the same knowledge that she can go and find for herself and take herself on this journey of her personal power. And indeed, some of the feedback I got from early reviewers who were probably in the same demographic category as the main character, let's say, was a couple of people have said to me, if she can understand this stuff, if she can relate to it and she can use it, then I guess I could, or anybody can. And so that was really important to me, to be able to make people feel that this character was both relatable and had elements that they saw reflected in themselves, even if they're not a UK female, that people could find things within it and think, well, if she could do this, then so could I. And if she finds it accessible, then so potentially not only could I, but anybody could. Because that's what we're all about at the Crypto Confidence Podcast, at Block Sparks. It's about making this stuff accessible and understandable. So you don't have to understand it so you can develop it or build it or create it. You just need to be able to understand enough to know how to use it, how to bring it into your life to achieve what you want to achieve. And it was quite a tricky balance to tread, because I really don't want it to end up being classified as chick lit, being seen as pink and fluffy, and women's literature. It's really not the intention at all. There are male characters in it. Honestly, I don't think I write the male characters as well. Anyway, I think this comes back to this write about what you know. I find it much easier to get into the head of female characters, and that's definitely feedback that I had from during the editorial process, that the male characters simply weren't as well developed, and I completely take that on board. I don't have that in my head to relate to, I suppose. And even right through to the cover design, I really tried to make it accessible for any reader, make sure that the cover wasn't feminized at all. Worked with a wonderful cover designer who pushed on through some challenging things in his own life to get this done for me, which I really appreciated. And he helped to guide me away from the kind of sci-fi. I wanted much more blockchain-y elements on the cover, but that could have put other people off who didn't relate to the kind of techiness of it at all. So he persuaded me not to turn it into something that looked like a prequel to The Matrix, instead to focus on the character, focus on her strength, but making sure at the same time that even though the cover featured the female protagonist, that it doesn't end up looking embarrassing for men, or something that, a guy wouldn't want to read on the tube going into work. It reminded me a little bit of when the Harry Potter books broke through into the mass market and adoption and being read by adults, that they rushed out a load of the earlier editions with completely different covers to stop it looking like a children's book, which was obviously a breakthrough that they hadn't foreseen in the earliest editions, the ones that are now worth a fortune if you have them. I don't. So that was something I wanted to get right from the start, was to try and make it accessible and draw people in who were curious about technology, yes, but were also just curious about seeing a personal journey of an interesting character as she goes about making changes in her life.
Brilliant. I think it's wonderful that it's such an easy toe in the water of being a fiction book for people to sort of learn about the subject, but it doesn't feel like you are learning. It's an enjoyable, pleasurable read.
Well, that's what I hope. And it's a really difficult balance to get right. Believe me, I cut a lot. If people do, in the early part of the book, if they do feel like they're getting bogged down in the exposition, then I apologise. Believe me, before I got editorial help, there was a lot more of it. I would have dragged you through kicking and screaming. So it's lighter than it was. There are a number of end notes in the book where I have explained things in a little bit more detail, because it was really important that those concepts are accessible and available, but that they didn't interfere with the story and with the pace of the story. Because if you're more concerned about what's going to happen to the character next, then you really don't want to know about the technical stuff. But if you're coming back to it a second time, or, you're more curious about the tech, then I wanted that information to be just a click away on the ebook, or just, flick to the back of the book on the paperback. You'll be able to get hold of that information. And I've also created a resources page on the Blogspark's website, because the only problem with putting stuff in print about such a fast-moving technology is that it does date extremely quickly. So the information in the endnotes is as evergreen and comprehensive as I can reasonably make it at this stage. If people just want to know a little bit more about what a node is or what a wallet is and so on, it's there. But that information we know is going to go out of date, because we know, don't we, Diana, with the clients that we're working with, just how many breakthroughs are on the horizon here.
Yeah, for sure. It's an ever-changing world, and it's fast moving as well. So fast.
Yeah, and it's going in the right direction. I mean, for characters like Carrie in the story, things are only going to get easier and better. Some of the hoops that she has to jump through initially to set up her wallet and to actually use her crypto in everyday life, those challenges are just going to disappear, and it's going to become more and more like just using money. We're working with clients who are developing the most amazing tools, which will be in everyday use within a year or so. So what I wanted to do with the resources page is make sure that we always have current, up-to-date information about what we consider the best in breed tools that people can use. Not that we ever recommend Blogsparks or Crypto Confidence. We don't say buy this coin. We don't say use this tool, but we do evaluate a lot of them, and we look at them. We try to look at them very critically from a consumer point of view. So that's what we want the book to be a conduit to. And I'll keep that page updated. At the moment, the page is exactly the same as the endnotes, but I expect it to evolve as things move forward.
Yeah, that whole mass adoption scene just seems so far away now, even though we are sort of in it already, and we understand, the basics of it at least, and if not further than most people. It just, the whole my mum or your mum opening a wallet and buying coins and all the rest of it just seems like such a long way away.
It really does, doesn't it?
But with books like this is a real bridge to get there. This is a woman. This is a story of a woman who's going through this whole process with a great storyline as well. So it's not just an instruction manual.
No one was going to read that.
It's a really good, engrossing story to get involved in, and you are subliminally learning at the same time, although you probably don't even realise it because it's so beautifully written as always.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's my hope, is that there's this there are people who are really into this stuff and love it and just get hooked on it in the same way that you and I do. And we talk about going down the rabbit hole, and once that's it, and you jump from one podcast or book or YouTube video to the next one, just absorbing all this information because you want to. That's great. Those people are taken care of. But we know from the adoption statistics that that's still talking about less than 1% of the world population as a whole. Yeah. Then at the other end, there's all the haters, skeptics, never gonna. The people who were really late to adopt any form of new technology or way of doing things. The people who will have to wait for a lot of other people to prove it and really make it difficult to get by without it. The last holdouts to get on social media or get a smartphone or whatever. It's going to be the same people. Can't do anything about those.
Eventually.
They will, yeah. But I'm kind of saying I'm not interested in those. Of course, I'm interested in everybody getting the most out of whatever they need to use in their life. But I don't feel that I can really speak to those people. They will just have to come along when they're ready. But in the middle, there's all these other layers of people who just need a little bit more hand-holding, just need some doors opening up, literally in their minds or in their lives. They need a reason to start using cryptocurrency, to start to grasp the potential. They need things to be made easy and accessible and universal for them. And, as we said, things are moving very quickly. Who knows what the Facebook Project Libra, for example, could change everything within 12 months. It could be something that people just have on their phones and use all the time. So what I want to do is start to speak to those people. If they would never dream of opening a crypto app on their phone, maybe they would dream of opening a novel. Maybe they would get absorbed in the story and maybe realise that alongside this character's journey, and hopefully they'll get caught up within her personal journey of what's happening in her life, that she is absorbing all these other lessons as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So as they are engrossed in this wonderful book, what will they actually learn about, sort of from a crypto and blockchain point of view? And do they need to know anything, any sort of technical bits and pieces before they read the book?
Oh, absolutely not. No, it's important to be clear about. And that was, part of why I was so focused on getting the design and everything else right, to make it absolutely clear that there is no need to even be interested or have any knowledge at all of even how money works, the normal money that we're all used to using every day. Because I think that's something that we don't question. We just,
It's completely taken for granted, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. And one day, cryptocurrencies will be treated exactly the same. For now, there is this gap people have to
Yeah.
cross within their own minds, almost within their own emotions, this leap to understanding it. So I wanted to start with a character who's actually quite naive about money and how that works because of her life circumstances. She's never had to make decisions for herself or manage things for herself. So she hasn't questioned a lot of what goes on around her. So she's able to learn about these things really alongside the reader. And you might even think, well, she knows a lot less than I do about some of the
Yeah.
things that you use every day. And that's fine because I don't want to leave anybody behind.
No, that's quite appealing as well, to not be sort of spoken at by an expert. It's to go along a journey with a person who is in the same sort of stages as you.
Yeah, or to find your point at which you can join her journey and come along with her as she finds out different things. Because I think, I've written her, although she has many disadvantages in her life, we shouldn't forget that she lives in a very privileged situation in the fact that she is a middle class UK resident. She has access to things like bank accounts and credit and smartphones and all the things that people take for granted who are part of that world, but they're not part of the world for the majority of the world's population. It's not the lived experience. So the fact that she's never had to question what it's like not to have those things,
Yeah.
hopefully that's a valid reflection on the way most of us who are lucky enough to be born into relatively stable economies and have our native currency a relatively stable sovereign currency, for all the fact that it's inflating and depreciating. It's not fluctuating wildly in the way that currencies around the world are. So she does come from that point of privilege of never having had to really think about it before. And I do believe that's going to reflect a reality for a lot of the readership. So definitely there are no prerequisites to have any interest in or understanding of even really how the money in your pocket or your wallet works. The character starts off knowing nothing at all. And through her pathway, as she moves on through her life, and it takes place over a period of about 3 years, the story, she learns about Bitcoin, she learns about wallets, she learns about sending and receiving cryptocurrency. We don't go into massive amounts of detail on the technical front because all of that is available in the end notes and on the resources page, but we see her downloading apps and setting them up. And we talk a little bit about security as well, because she has to learn how to protect those assets. And so she learns a little bit about setting up multi-factor authentication and securing the devices and the accounts that she's going to use. Again, I did have to cut a lot of that out, the editor gun to my head. So people just aren't going to read all of this. They're going to get too bogged down in it. So I tried to find the balance between this is what you absolutely need to know. I would hate anybody to dabble in this stuff after reading and not know how to protect their account, but I've tried to keep it light. So she does understand a little bit about securing her private keys, and hopefully she would then flick through to the end notes and click on over to our resources pages in order to find out what are the best apps to use and how to do it. She also learns a little bit about the fact that there are differences within the cryptocurrency world. There are different opinions, there are different schools of thought. Now, anybody who's spent any time on social media and crypto Twitter is very aware of this and the fact that it often gets really horrible and really bogged down. There's lots of people have very strong feelings about things that they care about. And because there is so much potential in this space at the moment, the way things could go, the way the future might look is being hotly contested by many people. So there are some very bitter arguments. And if you come in on the edge of that, trying to figure things out for yourself, then frankly, it's really off-putting. I hate the way that this space can end up with people shouting about what the future is going to be and who was the real Satoshi Nakamoto and who, which is the best Bitcoin, and we forked this and split the other, and it all gets really vitriolic. So I wanted to just hint at that difference. The fact that whilst this is a movement, and it is definitely a visionary movement that people have very clear ideas about, it's by no means one which is unified at all. And so she does encounter characters who assert different points of view, including somebody who's essentially a Bitcoin maximalist, and he has his take on it. And then she reads other points of view about altcoins and so on. So I wanted to keep it far more civilized than crypto Twitter, but hopefully it does present the idea that there are different forms of expression within this and different ways of looking at it. And it's just because we're talking about the future, talking about something unknown, and it's exciting and interesting that people have different visions of it, but it's just hopefully it can stay a bit civilized as well.
Yes, those very strong opposing opinions can be a little bit off-putting, I suppose, to people who are just sort of getting involved in this, and
Absolutely.
It's not always very nice at all.
Well, if you just went on
that's a nice
Twitter
bit.
and thought, yeah, I'll have a look at what's happening about cryptocurrency today, you've probably run amok.
Don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, what you need to do is find the accounts that Diana manages for Block Sparks on behalf of our clients, where you'll find informative, balanced, rational discussion of the various issues. But you can get bogged down with an awful lot of hate and trolling as well. So I didn't want the character. The character doesn't use social media much at all for reasons that will become clear early on in the book. So luckily we were able to keep her out of all of that, and she could just learn about it by conversations with actual face-to-face people that she meets and gets to know. So that was important to me, that we did express those different points of view, but without it turning into a troll fest. What else does she learn about? She learns a little bit about some of the underlying things that we talk about on this podcast a lot, understanding what trustlessness is and the way that transactions work in cryptocurrency. These are quite esoteric concepts which are difficult to put across in fiction and in conversation, but she does need to understand things like what happens when you pay for something, whether you use some kind of financial technology like a credit card or shopping online, as opposed to when you use cash or when you send cryptocurrency and you have a one-way irreversible censorship-proof transaction that can't be reversed. And she does have to learn that. She has to understand a little bit about what trustlessness means and how you can build trust out of a system versus when you have to have it in order to make things work, and what that means for centralization. She learns a little bit about peer-to-peer as well, and the original paradigm of cryptocurrency as it was defined by Satoshi Nakamoto in the Bitcoin white paper, a peer-to-peer electronic cash. Obviously, the character never reads the Bitcoin white paper, nor does she ever have to, and nor do you, but it is one of the fundamental things that underpins it, that whilst you can transact centrally on an exchange, and that's the easiest way to buy and sell when you're just getting started, because it's just like buying anything online. Plonk your card details in and you get your Bitcoin. And we've covered that a lot a couple episodes ago in the episode How Do I Buy My First Cryptocurrency? There are other ways of transacting, and she does learn a little bit about peer-to-peer transactions and sending crypto from one individual to another, and the fact that you don't even have to know that person, that there are peer-to-peer exchanges which can broker that transaction and make that happen. So there are lots of different ways of doing business in crypto. And as you get deeper and deeper into it, the situations just unfold before you and you realize all the different ways you can do it. And hopefully these are illustrated effectively by the events in the story. It is just worth mentioning that I was tried to be very careful not to date the story too much. Firstly, by specifying which coins, which apps, which different tools that she uses. I have to reference them generically and as a category, but I tried to avoid brand names and so on wherever I could for that purpose. I do want the book to be relevant over the next few years. Hopefully it won't be relevant at all in 5-10 years. Everybody will just know this stuff, and it will just be, a little anachronism, part of the history of that thing that they read way back when, and that nobody will need it at all. But for now, people do.
That's the hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Then my work will be done. We won't need a sequel. But as it is, I've tried to avoid referencing dates. You can certainly consider that the story unfolds in the earlier part of this decade. I've tried to avoid referencing prices at all because, as we know in this space, things fluctuate so wildly. I do reference the fact that prices go up and down, and can go in either direction very fast, and that's completely outside of anybody's control. But I really didn't want to tie it to specific pricing that would have everyone kind of thinking, oh, well, that must mean it was about midway through 2015 or whatever, because that's not helpful to the story. And the fact that this volatility isn't going to go away. So I wanted to reference that very broadly. And also it reflects some of the political and world events that are going on over the last few years in terms of migration and the politics of Europe. Again, without getting too bogged down in all of that, and there are other B words that we don't go anywhere near. But there are things that the characters talk about and are part of their life and their experience that do date the story to this decade, certainly. That's inevitable, but hopefully helps to build the context that this is now, this is real life. It's not something that's speculative and way off in the future. It's not something that's of historical interest. These are issues that affect everybody's life.
And people will look back one day and think, wow, we really did know nothing back then, and it took so long to sort of get on the Bitcoin bandwagon and all the rest of it. Hopefully not in the not too near distant future that people will think like that, and it will just all seem so normal and mainstream.
Well, I think that was the risk. If I tried to set it in the near future, it could have looked really dated. I've always been a bit of a sci-fi and fantasy geek, and I've got books that were written 20 years ago that talk about things that, and you can read them and sometimes think, well, that's quite prescient, talking about voice recognition and things like that, and other things that are just so anachronistic that they're laughable. And people talking about how we'll use floppy disks in the future when we're traveling in space, and I really didn't want to go there with it. I thought it was better to set it in a contemporary environment that people can hopefully pick it up and read it today and relate to, and see what the potential is for them to be using this stuff now, not thinking that it has to be in the future, because all we know about the future is that this stuff is going to change.
Yeah, it's amazing. So after hearing that, and everybody will be clamoring to get hold of your book, where can people buy it and how can they read it, in what formats?
Well, we're trying to bring it out in as many formats as possible. For all that the book is about principles related to decentralization and accessibility, I'm afraid we do have to start where the market is. So the first place it's going to end up is on Amazon, of course, which is just being finalized at the moment. By the time you are listening to this, it will be available on all of the Amazon stores, which is desperately centralized, but it's also the best way of getting it out there to a certain amount of the world. Anyway, so it's available for your Kindle, and it's also available as paperback. The paperback is print on demand, so you get it in a few days. But it does mean that it can be shipped to you locally, so you can have it whether you prefer ebooks or tree books. I'm also working to get it distributed via other bookstores, so it will be available online in a number of different ways. I know there are some people who really object to using Amazon. Also, interestingly, Amazon does not reach the whole world, and I think just like Carrie with her pounds in her pocket and taking money for granted that you could dip into credit or whatever, I think it's easy for those of us in Europe or the UK or the US to think, well, all you need to do is get it on Amazon, then everybody can download it. Not the case at all. There are Amazon stores in lots of developed markets now, but it still reaches a relatively small proportion of the world, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. From a book distribution point of view, you can't afford to stop at Amazon, which is why I didn't go down the route of putting it on Kindle Unlimited and making it Amazon exclusive, because I really, really want this to reach as many people as possible. So you will have to pay if you want to read it. It's not on Unlimited. But the reason behind that is that I can also distribute it through independent distributors, and make sure it reaches as many different bookstores as possible. Now, all of this takes time. It's also a journey for me. I've never published independently before. My non-fiction work has always been published through more traditional routes where I've not had to take care of any of this stuff. So bear with me as I work through the process. It's been an absolutely fascinating journey so far. I thought writing the book was the difficult bit, but since then, been through editing and formatting and design and all these decisions, which is absolutely fascinating. I've learned a great deal, but it takes time. So getting it onto Amazon, that was the easy bit in a way. All the independent distributors is a lot more granular. But what I've got is there is a webpage now at beyondthechainsbook.com, which I will put links to all the different distribution options. So Initially, it will just be an Amazon link. Please do check your local Amazon store. If it goes up on the co.uk site initially, that is not the only place it will be available. It should be available across all the different outlets. So if you do want the physical book, the paperback shipped to you, then it's important to order it from the place nearest you so that you get it shipped to you as quickly and as cheaply as possible. For the Kindle, you obviously need to order from the store where your device is registered, and then you can read it on anything. There will be other ebook formats as well. It will be available on Nook and iBooks, and all these things require slightly different modifications to the file and different pathways. So every time that something new goes live, I will get it up there. I'm looking at options for distributing via the blockchain itself. And for anybody who remembers episode 18, where we spoke to Suki Jutla, who published her book on the blockchain, that's certainly something that I'm investigating, which would enable you to own a very unique numbered copy of a book, which, if you are into this stuff in the way that we are, it's an option that I'm certainly very interested in pursuing and learning more about. So all of that information will appear on the page as it goes live. And you'll be able to get hold of it and read it. Somebody asked me about audiobooks. That's something which I will definitely look at some point, either to record it myself or to get it recorded by a professional voiceover. The latter is quite expensive, so it really depends on how it sells. It is an important market, though, I'm well aware. So it's something I would love to do one day. It's not going to happen soon. I'll be perfectly honest about that. I work from home and my podcasting setup is domestic. It's not perfect. It's not studio quality. As anybody listening to this regularly will know, we do our absolute best with it. But in terms of recording an audiobook, you would actually want to rent a professional studio. So it's a little bit down the line. But what I want to do is get it out to the world as fast as I can, to as many different bookstores globally as possible. If, like most of us, your local bookstore begins with A now in terms of local online, then you'll get it sooner than everybody else. But because of the themes of the book and because of everything that we're doing at Crypto Confidence and at Blogspots, it's really important to me that it's accessible. So I'll get it out there as widely as I can.
Yeah, and of course you need to follow our Crypto Confidence and our Blogspot social media, and we'll share the links regularly on there so that everybody knows where they can get it and nobody will miss out.
Definitely, and as new formats are released, we'll announce them. There is also a Facebook group for reviewers and readers, so particularly anybody who's read the book, we'd love you to come and discuss it with us. Let us know what you think. Let us discuss resources and things that you've found helpful on your own journey. We've also got the Crypto Confidence podcast discussion group as well, because this is all about the journey and about supporting you in your own learning going forward. So it doesn't stop when you finish reading the book. We want you to take it forward into your life and find out more about it. So we're really looking forward to your feedback. As I say, I do feel quite vulnerable. It's one thing when you're writing nonfiction and people either relate to it or they don't. You can check your facts and get them out there. People can't say it's right or wrong or good or bad. It just is that it's good writing and accessible or it's not. But fiction is actually so much more weird and emotionally to be putting out there, I must say. And it's funny when the first beta readers, who absolutely invaluable, wonderful people who read a very early version of the manuscript and gave me feedback on it, and they... a number of them were friends and family, but that I was really looking forward to their feedback and it was extremely helpful and actionable. But one thing I hadn't really anticipated was how weird it was going to be when they talked to me about my characters, right, and what they thought about them and how they related to them. I just hadn't thought about that happening because these were people who'd lived inside my head for so many months, and I'd been writing their dialogue and I'd been thinking about them. I'd been dreaming about them in some cases, which was a bit weird. I hadn't expected that either. And suddenly there were people saying, I really liked so-so when she said this. And, I was really moved when that happened. And I thought they actually care about these people and they have opinions about them.
Yeah, this has been in your head for so long and your imagination, and now it's out there for everybody.
It's quite scary, really. And now I realise that obviously opening it up to a wider world beyond my immediate friends and family creates a whole other new level of that vulnerability. But that's part of the process. That's what I I'm putting myself up for. We always try to be authentic at BlockSparks and at Crypto Confidence. We admit when we don't know things. We admit when things make us concerned about the future. We put ourselves out there, and hopefully people will be gentle but honest. If you would like to review Beyond the Chain, then please let me know. I'd be very happy to get a review copy to you by whatever format. Well, it would be electronic for the easiest distribution. But if you have a review site or a podcast or anything else and would like to get your hands on a copy, please do let me know. But otherwise, it will be available, to circle back to your question, at all the usual places.
Fabulous.
Well, Diana, thank you for coming on the show today to talk to me about the book, for enabling me to ramble on about it at great length. Again, it's this whole thing of getting it out of my head, which this is part of, and I'm going to have to get used to over the next few weeks. So this was a lovely, gentle start to it. Yes, and I don't think I'm going to be nudging you off your podcast host chair anytime soon. But yeah, that was a good experience for me to interview you for once. Oh, well, that's great. And I think it's good to remind people that there are other people behind BlockSparks. I can't do all this work myself. I tend to write the long stuff like books and white papers and articles and things like that. But Diana is the queen of getting it out there to the world, managing to reduce my 80,000 word novel to a 280 character tweet that encapsulates why people should read it and buy it. So look out for those on our accounts. And yeah, if you have any questions for Diana, then do raise them in our Facebook group. Do tweet us. We are CryptoConfPod at CryptoConfPod. Our Facebook community, you'll find all the links to that on the show notes page for this edition, including the link to the book page, which is beyondthechainsbook.com, where we'll keep all the links and information updated. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks for listening to Crypto Confidence. If you like what you hear, please do consider leaving us a review via your favourite podcasting app and joining the conversation online in whichever way you prefer. Full contact details are in the show notes for this episode. And remember, nothing in this podcast or our related social media, nor anything else published by BlockSparks OU at any location, is intended as financial, investment or trading advice. Everything we write or say represents our personal opinions for your information, education and entertainment only. You should not make any decisions based on anything we share with you, not without undertaking independent due diligence and consultation with appropriate professional advisors. Crypto Confidence is all about being smart and informed and making the right choices for you.